Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm super happy to be here. My name is Victor Agulhon. We're going to have 15 minutes of presentation and 10 minutes of Q&A if I manage to stick to the 15 minutes. As a quick intro, I co-founded a studio called TARGO. TARGO, we are an Emmy-nominated documentary studio. Our vision, really from the very beginning, we started 7 years ago, was to connect people with the world using immersive technologies. And so the way we do this is we focus on documentaries, we focus on true stories, themes that people know, people are familiar with. One of the big things that really struck me when we started, and I think is still true in some ways, is the sort of like disconnect you feel whenever you put on a VR headset. Most of the things you see don't really connect with what you see on other media platforms. If you turn on Netflix, TV+, Disney+, all these platforms, you don't really see the same kind of content as when you put on a VR headset. And our belief is really the idea that if we bring some of the themes that you know, the true stories of the world, into immersive technologies, we're going to be able to bring in more mainstream audiences, getting more users, more viewers, and just make these platforms a more media entertainment platform. Today, I'm going to use mostly one of the documentaries we produced, which is called JFK Memento. Courtney here, who spoke just before, was the executive producer on this film, and it won yesterday the Best Art and Film at the AWE competition. So I'm just going to play, thank you. So I'm going to play the trailer here, and I'm probably going to cut in the middle, but that's just the trailer of the documentary. It's available on the Quest headset.
That day is as vivid in my mind as if it happened yesterday. It was an exciting day to see a president in our lifetime so close. Would be a real experience. I thought, I saw his hair jump.
Boom, boom, boom. I heard 3 shots.
Governor Conley of Texas had been cut down by assassins.
Police cars are screaming away.
Open automobiles when the shots were fired.
It was chaos, but nobody knew what happened.
It was kind of chaotic out there.
Apparently they found some shells there in that room.
There were officers all around the building with their rifles and guns. Lee Harvey Oswald, that was the only one that we hadn't accounted for.
I didn't shoot anybody, sir.
He was unusual, I'll say that. But he wasn't a dummy by any means.
I found Lee to have a very narrow view of politics. I went out to the garage. I noticed the light was on. Oh, I was very surprised. I had no idea he had a gun.
The CIA, organized crime, Russia, or Cuba, even Vice President Lyndon Johnson. The list is almost endless. To this day, a majority of Americans believe a conspiracy was responsible in the assassination of President Kennedy.
So that's the trailer. So it's a 35-minute experience that's available on the Quest headset. The important point for this experience, and the reason why I want to use this as almost as a case study, is because the starting point of this experience was using the photos and films that were related to the JFK assassination. So we worked with the Sixth Floor Museum in Dallas, which has a huge collection of archive material. And the journey that we went on was about how do we make these materials relevant? How do we allow you as a viewer to dive into this story in a way that you've never seen before? The reason why it's important for us to work on these topics is because if you look at the history of VR, and if you look at the verticals of content that are slowly being validated, I think we all know the first one was gaming. It's very clear now there's very open markets. Gorilla Tag announced the $100 million in revenue. The second vertical, I think, was very clear, is also fitness. There's a very clear use case around fitness in VR. The question is what comes after this? And for us, it's going to be probably media, entertainment. Some people think it's going to be productivity and apps. And I think it's important for us as an industry to think about this, because in the end, it's our responsibility to figure it out. And we have to work on what is the good mainstream content, what can we create and distribute. one thing that I love, and I think it's a slow trend that we see evolving in all the presentation that we're seeing from the large companies that make the headsets, is we slowly see a transition from this, standing up cases, use cases of like gaming very active to mostly sit down, a sort of like sit back and relax activity. And that's very good for us as media creators, as entertainment providers, because I think that's very much what we envision. It's like the next evolution of TV, and that's what we have to crack. That's what we have to understand, is how do we make the next TV immersive in VR. So let's dive into how we can actually leverage the photos, the films into immersive experiences. Just to be very clear, what I'm going to be mostly talking about today is what we call rectilinear content. Rectilinear content is the content that fits usually on a 2D screen. That's like this, a sort of like 16:9 footage. So that's really the core of the experience. That's the starting point in this documentary, in JFK Memento, and in most of the experiences that we've produced. Turning these photos and film, these rectilinear footage into immersive, really is a scope. There's not going to be a one way to do it. There's, for us, 3 different techniques. The first one is the depth, the second is the position, and the third one is the lifelikeliness. So I'll dive into the 3 of them. We'll try to give as many concrete examples as I can. Depth. So that's really the first one, which I think is the most obvious. It's quite tricky for me to show everything about depth in a 2D screen, obviously, but I'll appeal to your imagination to try to get what that means. The first thing is depth is an ambiguous word. We'll talk about a few different types of depth, stereoscopic, volumetric, what that means, but the important thing to know is whenever you say something is 3D, people usually don't know what you're talking about. They don't know if it's made in 3D, they don't know if they need goggles, they don't know anything about it. So whenever we say depth, it's up to everyone to like interpret what it means. So let's start with the basic. The first thing we all know is when there's no depth, 2D, it's most of the content we consume every day. It's this footage and everything you're going to be seeing today, 2D, no depth. The second depth and the most, not the most interesting one, but one that I prefer is the stereoscopy. Stereoscopy, I guess most of you are familiar with what it is. Here, the stereoscopic footage shown in what we call anaglyph for all of the nerds around here. This is basically you show one image to the left eye, one image to the right eye, and it's static. You can't move around, you can't get any closer to the object, but there is depth. That's sort of like the cinema effect. When you go at the cinema and you put on the goggles that you're gonna be able to see. The question is, how do we create that effect? First way is we film with stereoscopic cameras. So that's very easy. We can do it. We have like a lot of cameras that exist. We can repurpose old content. This is an example of a film that was shot, I think, in 2013 by a film by David Attenborough on insects, and it was shot in 2013, and they repurposed it to create an immersive series on Quest called Micro Monsters, and they just took the stereoscopic footage, basically enlarged it, and put it in an immersive version. So that's the first kind of depth, stereoscopy. Same thing we did with a series we worked on, filmed with a 3D camera, and you see we have slight difference between the left eye and the right eye, and that's what gives you the sensation of depth. That's easy, because then you can film the depth. The thing is, when we talk about the JFK assassination and about archival content, we don't have that stereoscopy, we don't have that information. So we have to invent it or to infer it. Here's the sort of like the behind the scenes look at what we do and how we can create stereoscopy. We have to work with studios, 3D artists that are going to like identify every single layers to associate depth to it and to recreate a sort of magic window effect. So this is a footage we all know, the Zapruder film from the Kennedy assassination. In the film, we cleaned it, and here you can see the slow tilt left-right. That's the stereoscopy. And when you look at this in the headset, you do feel like you're looking through a magic window. Today, these are some of the depth maps that we use AI to generate. The reality is most of it has to be done by hand, and someday it's going to be replaced, and someday meaning pretty soon, but today we're not there yet. AI, I feel like I had to put a slide with AI, so like here's the AI slide. But it's a reality because there's Apple that announced something to convert 2D footage into 3D stereoscopic footage. There's Owl 3D, there's Leia, Immersive, so there's just like plenty of apps right now that are focusing on converting the existing footage that we all have on our phones from 2D to 3D stereoscopy. So that's the first kind of 3D, and that's the magic window effect that you look into a new world. That's the 3D cinema, the magic window effect. It's stereoscopy. The second one, and one which I think is usually the most mind-blowing to people, is the volumetry. Here, the difference is that it's not only in depth in 3D, but you can actually walk inside these things. So we have to rebuild the entire scene in 3D, in real-time engines, to allow people to walk into them. So this is one of the techniques we developed for JFK Memento. One clip that we basically rebuilt in 3D, and so here is a slow reprojection of it, and you could walk in the scene, you can walk in the 3D footage, and that's an experience that's only achievable within VR. Like, it's not something you're gonna be able to recreate on the screen. Here it looks interesting, but in VR there is like a real sense of connection. These are some more of the examples that we've used. Same principle, reconstruct everything in 3D engines, and then showcase it in VR. So that's for the depth. That's just one of the elements. The second element is the position of the element. The first thing, and I honestly thank the Apple Vision Pro team for coming up with visuals that make it clear for everyone. The first way you can distribute and showcase rectilinear content is you put a floating window. So that's most of the ads that we've seen online. It's like, okay, a floating window in front of the viewer. It's not very elaborate, but it's very powerful to convey just the idea of how you're gonna be able to watch something. That's sort of like the first step. The second step of the position is you don't position only the footage in someone's surrounding, you can position it in a surrounding that's relevant to the content you're showcasing. This is one of the Disney examples from Star Wars, where they showcase a Star Wars film into, I think it's a Tatooine world, but in a Star Wars themed environment. The real interesting thing here is when you combine these techniques of the position with the techniques we just talked about before. Here's the example of what I call the real magic, and what was for us really the discovery in JFK Memento was the idea that if you take this magic window effect, you rebuild an environment that matches what you've seen before, then you have a magic window that comes on top of the scene, and you just feel like there is a sort of like an area where the film comes back to life right in front of you. So that's some of the footage that you've seen in the trailer. And to break it down, so the window you see here is stereoscopic 3D. So you have the feeling that you're seeing the action take, like action in front of you, and you're following it, and you have like really that sensation that in the scene, the action comes back to life, and that's a very powerful sensation in VR. So that was the first one, and the second one, which was honestly the most impressive and the one that we loved the most and we discovered during the production, was taking the same environments, but not only putting on the stereoscopic 3D magic window, but actually reprojecting the 3D volumetric scene that we showcased before. So here's some more behind the scenes of the whole recreation of the environment that we had to do. Whenever the video want to play. Okay. So we scanned the entire scenes. We rebuilt them exactly as they were in 1963 at the time of the assassination. And these are the footage that we reprojected right onto them. And so that sensation, this like progressive overlay of like 3D projection onto the scene is something that is absolutely incredible to watch in headset. The last element, and here I want to show a project that we've been prototyping recently, is really working on the lifelikeness of the objects. Here, everything you see is either it's a video which is moving, or it's a picture which is static, but there's an in-between that exists. The first element to bring something to life and to make it more vivid is obviously bringing it colors, if I'm able, yeah. So this is obviously a picture we all know from D-Day. The picture is called Into the Jaws, and there's a coloring artist who's called Marina Amaral, who does an incredible job, and she really brings to life all these scenes, and she really transformed them, and just this, even in 2D, feels much more lifelike, feels much more real, and if you transition this into VR, it's just another world. So that's the first thing. You can bring colors. Obviously, it's quite an intensive work if you want to do it. And the second thing is you can animate the scenes. And that's something that's pretty cool because you're not only showcasing one moment in time, but you just create a sensation that the time is slowly like floating. And so that's something we're working on right now. We've been prototyping something around the D-Day landings, and we took that picture, did the exact same thing of reprojection, but we added some slight animations of smoke, the water, just trying to make like slow moving splashes, which just brings it to life around you. And that's a prototype on the Vision Pro that we've built. So here you could technically walk in the middle of the soldiers if you wanted. It's not how we design these experiences. They're sit down and sort of watch experiences, but really the goal is bringing back these movements and these moments in life through immersive technologies. So this is just like a quick graph of how we think about it. It's going to be expanded, it's going to be moving. Some of the elements are going to go away with time, but I think is it the matrix of how we think about projecting the 2D, the rectilinear footage into immersive experiences to make it relevant and basically to answer the question of why is it better to watch it in a VR headset, in an AR headset, MR headset versus on a screen. And everything I'm showing here to you is 2D, and I highly recommend you go and watch the JFK experience on the Quest store just because I think it makes much more sense when you see it. You can to actually physically understand what we're talking about here. Why it's important, and the reason why we've been doing this is we're trying to open a whole new field in immersive programming in general. There is a lot of focus, I think, from the very beginning on sort of like very particle artistic experiences. I think we can now go beyond that stage. We can leverage all of the footage we all know. We can try to talk about the real stories, show them in a realistic way. And for us, it's really about taking a next step in VR. The second thing, and I think that's critical to everyone, is connecting the past and the present. Connecting the past and the present in two ways. First, to talk about events that we all know, so we can talk about events in history that everyone knows about, creating that connection between the medium, and also just being able to connecting past formats and present formats, connecting the rectilinear frame to the immersive frame. And so for us, that's really what we're all about. It's our responsibility now, us as an industry, to create these new mediums, to try to find out what works, what doesn't, to bring in new technologies, the stereoscopy, the volumetric, and trying to assemble everything into documentaries, experiences that are relevant to viewers. So I can really only say one thing is the only limit to the rectilinear footage brought into the world in immersive is really going to be our creativity. And now I would be happy to take your questions. Thank you very much.
Great presentation. Love that you went through all that detail. I have a slightly nerdy question. Obviously, the footage of JFK was shot on a Super 8, so it's a little bit jumpy. And I noticed that you chose to stabilize, but it looks like you stabilized the car movement. Was that a choice you made? And if so, like, what was the thinking behind stabilizing that versus stabilizing the tracking with the background scene?
So we tried a lot of different things, and here I'm just showing obviously the final result we landed on. If you want to track exactly all of the camera movements, you end up having a footage that's going to be moving like this. And so just for the comfort of the viewers, we didn't actually track the footage. We just chose to approximate the position and to make it move slowly. And even if it doesn't match the exact position at all times, people just we fill in the gaps, and we see that maybe the corner of the building is off by, 50 centimeters or an inch when we see it. But it does convey the same sensation. And we tried not to change too much the footage originally because working with the museum first, it was important. And for us, just in terms of editorial integrity, it was critical that we didn't change too much the way the footage were shot or anyway.
And it was based mostly on comfort, right? Comfort for the viewer.
Yes. It's comfort and just making sure that you're not distracted by anything in that experience. And that's why we did a lot of blurring around the edges, just to have smooth transition to make sure there will never be stereo conflict in the headset. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. So for me, I'm at kind of a point where I'm trying to figure out what kind of hardware, what kind of platform that I want to start like interacting with these things. And I think you brought up that this is on the Quest platform to view this experience, and it's making me excited to get a Quest headset. I was curious, and this might be a marketing question: is there a lot of effort to put this out into the massive general public to try to get people to these interactive platforms, or is that more of just kind of like a different beast on its own?
So the way we see it is we rely on the big companies, the Apple, the Metas, and the next companies that are going to make these headsets to advertise the power of VR or of immersive technologies to the public. What we try to do is just to address the people that have VR headsets and to show them the possibilities that we can, of what we can create. The thing that is very difficult today on the Quest platform especially is it's very much a gaming community that's on the platform, and cutting through the noise and getting out there to the mainstream gaming audience is extremely difficult because you're basically sort of like relegated to the second league on the Quest store. So these things are going to change. Today, for non-gaming content or non-fitness content on the Quest store, it's extremely challenging. So we try to address it as much as we can, but there's only so much we can do. So I'm happy to see Apple coming out with this approach of a sit-down device, an entertainment platform, and that's very good because I think it's slowly going to be, that's what it takes, I think, to change and update the strategies.
First of all, congratulations and thank you so much for sharing all of these details about how you think about each and every media that you're using in the documentary. But let me ask you a question about the ending. What technique did you use to compile all of these different assets together, and what is the output form? Did you use any specific render engine, or what is it exactly that you did?
So it all ends up in Unity. So we build it in Blender. We build it, on Nuke. Depending on the media we're going to be using, there's a whole pipeline that's going to be different for every single footage. But in the end, for us, immersive technologies should be about an interactive frame, which is a frame in which you can move 6 DoF. You have the freedom of movement, but then you can, you have rectilinear content, 2D, 3D, and all of these things. But it all happens in a real-time engine in Unity, and in the end, it's an APK if you're on the Quest store.
Hey, wonderful presentation. I have a question regarding generating the depth map. Was that done manually? And at the end of the day, you're going to need 2 different pictures, right? There's missing data you have to fill in. So can you elaborate on that, please?
Yes. So for previous experiences, we had done only manual work. So we basically worked with different studios that just did only manual work. For this one, it's the first time that the manual work was, the first pass was done with AI. The thing is, AI is not anywhere near usable in production today, and it's going to be there in 2 years. But today, the way it worked is for the first step, depth maps were basically done with AI. For stills, it worked. For videos, it never really worked. But I think what was interesting for us. It's the first time in production we were able to use AI, and some of the footage in the films were converted in 3D using AI. But I'm optimistic about all the new solutions. Every time I just see a new software, it's just the results seem to be better and better, and the output is actually better and better. So there's a mix of technique, but to be completely frank and give credit where credit is due, today most of the work that's been done has been done by artists and just manual time, because we want to be able to fine-tune every single detail. You don't want at some point one part of the car to look like it's super at the back. So and depth is also very personal, as in not everyone perceives depth in the same way. And so you have to adjust sometimes things that are not physically correct, but that look better. Do we have one last question?
If there's another question, we can continue to. It's kind of same off the depth stuff. Regarding that, you mentioned that there were some AI algorithms that worked pretty well for photo, not for video. Have you been experimenting with more of the video ones coming out? And you mentioned it's mostly manual now. Is it a lot more successful if you denoise first? What sort of workflows are you going through in order to do that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because we use AI. One thing that we use AI for a lot is upscaling the photos, denoising the photos. That works like magic. Absolutely, there's no fine-tuning that you need to do. You can remove some more scratches by hand, but if you control it carefully, upscaling, denoising, incredible. Like really that worked, and that's fully used in all the footage you see. They look like super high quality thanks to this. And the question about the tools, the new tools to convert videos, the D-Day prototype we've done, we've only used automated AI, and to be frank, sometimes it creates just like comfort issues. I think we're realistically 2 years away from having something that's like perfectly usable in production. And we'll definitely use it when it's going to be ready, because it just takes costs like incredibly down. So it's a pretty powerful tool. So I think we're up. Is it good? Is there? Yeah. Thank you very much. Sorry? I mean, if there's one more question, maybe we have some time.
I'm just curious to know how long the process took.
So the process, so I think a long part of the process was we spent, I think, six to 9 months trying to just like throwing ideas at how we do, like what level of rotoscoping we do. Like all of these techniques was just like getting into a room, like spinning tons of ideas and just trying them. And some of them were absolutely horrible. Some of them worked out really well. But so I think we had like 6 to 9 months of like really complete prototyping, because also these ideas that take time, you have to like, you know, it's the ideation process was pretty long. The whole production from the moment we got the final green light to the moment we released it, I think there was 12 to 14 months, approximately.
6 to 9 months.
Yes. And the 6 to 9 months was basically the sort of like, we got some prototype money at the beginning just to like test, and then we were defining the formats, what we wanted to do. Because this, let's say we had found no way to make archival footage relevant in VR, we would have been like, look, it's not a project we can do in VR. But it ended up not being the case. We found out the good way. And then it was like, yeah, 12 to 14 months of production. Then I think we're good. Thank you very much.